Good afternoon. The November 7th, 2022 Board Special Committee on Housing is now called to order. Before we get started, we need to make certain findings on the record regarding the necessity for conducting this meeting by electronic participation without the physical quorum present due to travel restrictions. In accordance with the Tennessee Code annotated section 844-108B2, as chair of the Board Special Committee on Housing, I offer the following facts and circumstances in support of a finding of necessity for the special committee to conduct the November 7th, 2022 meeting without the physical presence of a quorum. The special committee is scheduled to take up important matters that require timely action by the committee, including addressing the committee's charge and receiving reports on TSU's current housing status, spring 2023 housing needs, and TSU's proposed long-term housing plan. Participation by electronic means is necessitated by travel-related issues involving committee members. Accordingly, I move that the Special Committee on Housing find that participation by a quorum of the special committee members by electronic means of communication is necessary. Is there a second?
Trustee Johnson or Trustee McKenzie?
Second.
The question is on the motion to find that participation by a quorum of the members of the special committee by electronic means of communication is necessary. Secretary Pendleton, would you call the roll?
Trustee Pinnick?
Aye.
Trustee Andre Johnson?
Aye.
Trustee Obi McKenzie?
Aye.
The motion carries. We will proceed with the meeting with the quorum present. At this time, we need to call the roll. Secretary Pendleton, please call the roll.
Trustee Pinnick?
Present.
Trustee Andre Johnson?
Aye.
Trustee McKenzie?
Present.
We have a quorum. Thank you. Committee members, if you cannot hear or speak to the other committee members or board members, please state so now. For each committee member participating electronically, please identify any individuals who are present in the location from which you are participating. If none, we will proceed with the next agenda item, which is the charge of the committee. The board has heard reports from time to time from university management and has engaged in discussions about housing-related plans to meet the university's short-term and long-term housing needs. In accordance, the Ad Hoc Housing Committee will be charged with coordinating with TSU President Glover and Board Secretary Pendleton to hold and conduct appropriate meetings to provide guidance and direction to President Glover and designated members of the administration in the university's development of a housing plan to address the university's long-term and short-term housing needs. The Ad Hoc Housing Committee members may also provide related reports and recommendations to the board as deemed appropriate. And I would also add parenthetically that we also want to ensure that to our external stakeholders that housing is coming to the attention of the board and that we will be on an ongoing basis reviewing said matters. The next agenda item is a report on TSU's current housing status. This is an informational discussion item, so no vote is required. I'm asking President Glover or her designee to provide a report on this agenda item.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and other board members, both on the phone and those who are here in person. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the housing plan and how we're addressing our current housing challenges. We put together a paper for you. I'm going to ask if these teams will take the lead in this, but overall, we're saying that we recognize that we're still in the challenge. We appreciate how we're coming out of it, and we handle things for the first few months. We had challenge. We answered every request. We met the issues head on, and ensure that students are safe, students have transportation, they have the proper Wi-Fi, they get the meal coverage they need. So we feel that we've met the requirements we were trying to meet. So we want to use what we've done this semester, really improve it, box it up a lot of knots, and then go into the fall, January of 2023, fall of 2023 and beyond. So I said that, and asked Dean Stevenson, but he's just got to take over and start going over. I guess the housing plan summary and overview and everything, just kind of go through the course. So everybody's not there.
And just gotta make sure we're sort of following the contents of the agendas within that, because that contains everything really.
So currently we have 3,682 beds that we call on-campus beds. These are the beds that we have on campus, including our campus and partners. Of course, this year we were out of 1,000 students that are residing off campus.
Let me stop for a second. I kind of want you to go through how you laid it out on the
Okay.
grid. What is dated October 3rd. You go to the first below the mission, overview. You start with the status of the teacher home. Okay.
Yeah, so on page, maybe page 3, it gives the breakdown of each year of the buildings that we have and the capacity. And some of, you'll see in some places.
Okay.
You'll see in some places where there's a fluctuation of beds, and that's added space that we created, some flex space that we created. So.
So, yeah, Frank, you have a different document than we have.
Okay.
You have a-
I'll print off the long one.
Oh.
I'll print off the long one.
That is.
Yeah,
No, no, keep yours. How about that? That's what you got so many.
We just need you for the bottom line number. You don't need details, you just need to know how much.
Okay. So in this one, it's still the same thing. It shows you the type of residence hall that it is, the number of beds, the year that it was open. You'll see some that says traditional, then the suites, and then the dorms, of course, our apartments as well. And of course, some with the mixed, like the new residence hall.
Frank, your first number for us was 3682.
The first number is Board Hall, 364.
When you first started, you said you had 3,682 beds.
That's
This is
right.
80. So is it 82 or?
Well, we say 80.
It's a,
Yeah, it's 80.
he corrected.
So-
it.
Okay.
So 3,680 beds. You have, again, this breakdown of each one. You can see that our new residence hall has the largest capacity of beds. And then the new residence center NRC breaks down with the smallest. You can see we added in here just to kind of as a key factor, the enrollment over the last 10 years. There are two components of the enrollment. One is that even when our enrollment may not have been as high, our bed space need kept going up. So that's in relation to the city and the cost of living and all those things. So when you look at, again, Texas State University and the number of undergraduate students that we house compared to other institutions, our numbers are significantly higher. Take Austin P percentage-wise, Austin P, UT Martin, even University of Memphis, percentage-wise, undergraduate enrollment, our numbers are significantly higher, right? And that's in direct correlation to living in Nashville and what that cost looked like for our students. But you can kind of see that chart of the enrollment over the last 10 years. All right, one thing on the next chart that you'll see that stands out is the enrollment of first-time students. So this past year, You can see that number pretty much doubled from 2021 and has been increasing, kind of a steady increase in 2016 of that number kind of going up. You can really see around 2020, 2021, and 2023. Those numbers of first-time freshmen were really, really high, and it continues to trend that way. With this year being the highest one. I mentioned this before, but in the report, we put some statistics and some information around the cost of living. And obviously, those of you who are here don't have to spend a lot of time in that. You know that this obviously does not fit in the framework of what college students could normally afford. College students typically will take roommates in. And so if you got you're paying rent and it's $900 and both you all are splitting that $450 a piece, you could work and go to school and make that work. But when you have a rent and you got a roommate and it's $1,600 or $1,800, then that makes it a little tough in terms of working and going to school. And so our students, we saw as the housing market started to shift in Nashville, we saw a demand or a need for housing, right? That continued to increase. But one of the bigger factors this year is probably not just the housing cost, but also the enrollment of the first-time freshmen. You'll see here, and I'll jump right into our housing plans for both the spring and the fall.
Do you mind if I just add for a couple of things?
Yes.
I was going to say, to put it simply, our demand for housing significantly exceeded the supply we had. Because on the demand side, as Dean said, we have critical factors. First critical factor is that with the record first-time enrollment. Second thing is an increasingly high cost of living in Nashville. And the third one, which is related, is the lack of affordable housing in the area. You're not talking about affordable housing for years in this area. So this experience, since we experienced this record enrollment, first-time students, 35, 67 students, this contributes overall increase in our demand in housing. The demand was there, but now we have an increased demand because the 5-year average of first-time students, as DC gave us in the past, from 2017 to 2021, was around 1,500 students. It was 1,479. This year we had more than double that. So that demand is up. And so we had an unprecedented enrollment yield. Typically 29 to 30% of the students that we admit accept the TSU to enroll. They get accepted TSU, they also get accepted at FIS, they get accepted at Memphis, and TSU and others. And so this year, 41% of them chose to attend TSU. And so that was outside of our norm. Even we're allowed for just a few more. That really was outside of our norm. So then we said the second critical factor is not far. So that is that the high cost of living in the Nashville area. The literature shows that the cost of rent property increased almost 30% from year over year in Nashville. So the property around TSU is being purchased by other investors. And they offer properties for rent, and that rent is exorbitant. It does not include student rent at all. So there's a student housing because Nashville, unlike the other areas, the locations of the other schools in Tennessee, we're in an urban area. We're in a capital city. The growth rate here is 100 persons per day move here. So, and then that's a demand for housing. So as investors build more housing, they're not building for students, they're building to recoup their investment. So there's no housing around the campus of the building. We don't have that in Nashville. That's a third critical factor that we have. And unlike other public institutions, the private real estate developers have not developed in the housing around the campus that will help us.
We're going to mention anything about the traffic.
Oh, yeah. And those who would have stayed on campus, stayed off campus, have a problem getting the housing, renting housing, and also the cost of travel, the traffic coming to campus was so high. And the traffic is a problem as well as the cost of traveling. Taking that long 30 to 45 hour commute is not easy in bumper traffic. So those are the areas, those combinations have challenged our typical overflow housing inventory.
I was gonna hold the question until I finish the report, but I will ask you. You mentioned that developers are building market rate housing. That's true, they are. And you mentioned that we are an urban institution. That's true. But we are also land grant, which means we've got 500 acres minus what's being used and what may not be usable. So what does that leave us in terms of usable real estate that does not have to be purchased? It has to be built upon.
That's great, and that's what he was getting into.
Okay.
Our plan for fall 2023 and 24, and beyond that.
Before we get to that, Mike, can I ask one more question? In addition to the 3567 first-time students who came, because of the housing price cost in the area, our sophomores, juniors, and seniors also then needed housing because they couldn't afford housing. And so what percentage of people in our housing right now are not first-year students, but rather are our returning persistent students?
So normally, you see a high number of your seniors who move on campus. So typically, by the time they get to their senior year, we're normally, normal university only housing typically about 25% of that group, 20 to 25%. This is obviously significantly higher for us. Of the 3,400 students, freshmen, all of the rest of those are upper class. So, yeah.
So we're talking 280.
No.
There's a number of beds you have, 36.
That's the number of beds we have on campus. That's not including House of God and all of it. Yeah.
So what's our total bed count?
That was,
Maybe that's the way I need to look.
They're about on campus and off campus.
Whatever, however we do it, where people are sleeping.
I can tell you,
you got it.
if you look on page.
And the point is that I want to say, this is not just the incoming student issue. This is the persistence student issue. It's a retention issue for our sophomores, juniors, seniors. And as we move forward with the plan, whatever the plan is going to be, we need to accommodate those current and continuing students, as well as the incoming freshman class. And then, since I'll put my R1 hat on, we also want to be able to postdocs and graduate students and faculty and all that kind of stuff in this plan. Although that may be 5, 10 years away, we need the plan now to cover the whole thing. So the housing plan, as I view it, has to look beyond our incoming students, beyond just our student population, but also our faculty, staff, and other professionals that we bring on the campus to do the entire faculty community, the whole campus community.
Yeah. So the initial idea when we were going after Jefferson Flats was for graduate and faculty and staff housing. So we started that conversation a year and a half ago. And that's what we definitely wanted to provide, graduate housing. We realized that we couldn't compete with other institutions if we didn't have a place for graduate students to live, right? So
What is Jefferson?
So Jefferson Flats are some apartments adjacent to the campus.
We actually started these housing conversations in 2014.
Right.
And each time we tried to get housing, it was denied by TBR for various reasons, whatever reason that they use. So we talked about one, demolition of older buildings, bringing on new buildings. We talked about non-traditional student housing, graduate, married, veteran. But we've had this conversation for almost 10 years now.
Yeah, we talked about it in 2010 when I came. So, yeah.
So and then of course it was in the 2008 master plan.
Right.
Where we talked about housing for the campus. So this is an ongoing conversation. Stevenson referenced Jefferson Flat. We also talked about trying to acquire Court Villa several times since I've been here. So these conversations have been ongoing, and for whatever reason, we have been unable to acquire additional property, even to construct housing that, people like, for example, Court Villa, we said we'll use it and then tear it down and build new housing there, because it already has the infrastructure and it's adjacent to the campus. So it'll be easy to assume.
What I'm trying to
I know what you asked.
present is
No,
that
we got it.
the
The
picture-
picture. Let's
total
start with the-
picture.
let's start with the picture. Let me just tell you, we had 36A beds on campus. It's on, if you step over to 2 more pages, you'll see the spread through chart. Turn over to, that's unfortunately not the pages. It says housing, title says housing fall 2022. Yes. You can see the total beds available for the second semester, 4425. If you add 470 more to that from this fall, that's where we're at the fall, this fall. We house almost 5,000 students this fall, like 40.
So when I talk to my colleagues at, we go to these housing conferences, particularly those that are in this area, Nashville, Belmont, Vanderbilt, and they, they're all dealing with the same thing in terms of needing to provide beds. The private institutions can do it very quickly and do it, I mean, they've thrown towers up all up and down 12th and everywhere else. And, for us, even the new resident hall, from conception to turning the key, was 5.5 years, right? So we're hoping that the state will work with us and help us move the needle on our needs. Again, when the master plan for housing was initially introduced 7 years ago, one of the greater focus was taking some of the traditional dorms offline, right? So we were really trying to get those beds replaced. Now we've been at capacity in terms of housing on this campus for a very long time. Prior to this year, our capacity number was 2,950. So we've been over that number. I've been here 9 years. We've been over that number every year, right? But the last 3 years is where we've seen the greatest jump, and it jumped very quickly and it jumped very aggressively. So our numbers, remember last year we needed a hotel too at Best Western because, and again, that was with a freshman class that was only 200 from the prior year. But the need for housing continued to increase. So the housing, 42% 5 years ago, then it goes up to 43%, then 59%, then 64%, then 71%, right? So that's the growth of undergraduate housing that we're doing right now. We house almost 5,000, right? Undergraduate students. You take our undergraduate numbers and you'll see that's very significant, right? So there is to your point, there is a need for us to move, aggressively. It takes time to build buildings, right? Yeah. And the city has shifted very aggressively. Trustee, as you mentioned, one thing we have in our favor is that we do have space, right? That's the other thing that everybody in Nashville is a little envious of. And they're always constantly giving us a pitch on what we can do with it, right? We do have the space to accommodate and build what we need. And at one point we were looking at the riverbank development, which also included a component of housing, traditional and non-traditional, right? And it's to that point.
And you recall, we were presenting a plan in 2021. We just have last year, last year before last. Year before last, we presented to the 2021, fiscal 2020, 2021, that year, to the board about the housing and housing needs and where we thought we would be. That's why it's not that we didn't project, it's just that so many students came and they moved back. We can't control the loan costs in Nashville. That's not within our purview. We just know that when students came to us who would normally have lived off campus, we didn't want to turn them, we made a decision, a conscious decision, not to turn our backs on students who were juniors and seniors, and some were graduating because they couldn't find housing. Our population definitely out of semester, the literature shows, they don't come back.
come back.
They don't come back. And so we made a decision to try to help them. So we would call around, we get in hotels. So we gave a lot of hotels. We did a worst case scenario. In retrospect, we probably should not give them a worst case scenario because that kind of got everybody out of the box. But we knew we needed more than 2 hotels we had last year. And so the numbers ranged from like 8 to 12 hotels that we needed. They ended up letting us have 5 hotels. Because, as you can see, we're not enough because people still ask for more space. But we took what we could get and we kept working.
Something that you guys might want to also address is, go ahead.
I have a question.
Go ahead, trustee McKenzie.
Do we know exactly how much? Yeah, do we know how much land we have, the land grant institution? Do we know how much land we have available that does not have to be purchased, that can be used to engage the private sector in helping us to solve this problem?
As a swap or as building sites.
As a
86.
building site, with a low cost base, which allows us to negotiate with the private sector in a way that yields market rate returns for the risk in the asset class that we engage the private sector with. For example, if there's land available to us that we control, that does not have to be purchased, that represents an asset with which we can negotiate with the private sector and advantage ourselves with numbers that will allow us to be affordable, not $1,600 a month, but $900 a month. And that being allowed because of the low cost of the land we're engaging the private sector with. So it begins with what do we have control of in terms of land to engage the private sector with?
Well, let's do it this way. Thank you. We have a little over 80 acres that could be developed. But about 20 acres of that flood zone other. So we float the number of 60 acres. Now, 6 acres of land that a lot of developers are contacting us about, trying to buy it. We can't sell any assets, but because though TSU, we belong to TSU in a custodial belonging, is still property of the state. And we're the state entity that they're entrusting with this. So we can lease space. Plus we're not interested in selling in space. Well, like to your point, we do want to construct. We are able to construct housing, and then even affordable housing, so that the rental. We looked at some. We talked to 2 or 3 developers. We were very close on one, but we couldn't get the numbers to work out right in our favor. And we talked to the second one that just basically had a ski mask on. So we had to walk away. But we are meeting with third-party developers about the proper use of the land. We have another deal on the table we're going to present, or it's not on the table yet, that's coming to us. We're presenting the board meeting about how we can use the land also effectively. So we have a lot that we're talking about because it was a secret. Now it's known that there's land at TSU, but people want to purchase it. We don't get very many. We have had a handful who want to lease a long-term lease. If you get a long-term lease, in other words, Trustee McKenzie and Trustee Johnson, if it's long-term, it's almost the same as fee simple, because you got so long, you got 30 or 50-year lease. But that's what we are with it. So your point is well taken, because that is how we want to do it. So we can control our own rents on it, the affordableness of it to our students and whomever else we can use.
And in addition to what the president just shared, we also
have the power.
We're also engaging in conversation with the contractors.
What did you ask? Trustee McKenzie?
No, I didn't, my question is on the table and I'm getting closer to an answer. If in fact we have the power to negotiate a long-term lease with private sector?
We do with the system, state building
Right,
commission.
through the state building commission
Everything that
process.
involves financing and funds, any property that involves financing and funds must go through the state building commission. If we present the right plan at the right time, you know, we've got other things too.
And the and any disposition of property really goes to SBC. One of the things that the SBC looks for and emphasizes also is a competitive process, so that you have a number of developers that could come forward and say, here's what I can do. And then developer B says, here's what I can do. And you look at the financing structure and all of that, that there's a compare and contrast, because ultimately they believe that's in the best interest of the state, which is their charge. Ultimately.
Of course. Yeah, of course. So basically you have an RFP process, which takes into account our problem and also takes into account cost of capital to the state.
Yes.
And something that does not negatively impact the overall creditworthiness of the state balance sheet, because it increases the cost of capital through the issuance of municipal bonds for housing purposes around in other places. So we got that. So if we got this, that's an opportunity. We can engage the community of private investors and developers with a long-term lease and plug the numbers to suit our purposes to see that the return on investment to the private investor and the risk-adjusted cost of capital to the state is in line. So it's a Rubik's cube. We're protecting the state's balance sheet. We're protecting ourselves with a cost that will accommodate our student population. And we're putting the private sector in a foot race for who can offer us the best deal.
Yep.
That's exactly.
So a lot of other institutions, to your point, have been innovative in terms of how they have created housing space. And so the public-private partnership is something that we have begun to look at very aggressively. It wins in several ways. One is that it allows us to move a lot quicker. You know, the private space can do those things a lot quicker once it's approved by the state. The other thing is that it also allows us to diversify the risk when we do that. So, we've got some ideas now on the table of what that public-private partnership could look like.
So do you mind if we go ahead and talk about the spring and then the fall and then come back to everything? So we'll go to the spring. And then we can put our plan for the spring.
Yes. So the spring housing plan is to reduce 3 hotels. We will lose Ramada Inn, we'll lose La Quinta, and we'll lose Camden. And that's about 480 students that will come out of those 3 hotels. And we looked at the data over the last 5 years of what our spring returning student numbers look like. Those numbers typically were running about 15% attrition rates. We ran those numbers at 11%. So we anticipate that 11% will graduate, that are in housing, will not return, will transfer, will stop out. All of those pieces that go into what happens between fall and spring. So the expectation is that we will accommodate those students in the 3 hotels. We won't meet them because we'll accommodate those in those attrition spaces on campus or either in one of the other 2 hotels. And so our numbers, our expected numbers, available beds for the spring would be 4,425. That number is in your packet there. We will also obviously be able to reduce security in the shuttle services and costs for those 3 hotels as well. And all but Candlewood, the other 2 were the furthest out in terms of distance to and from the campus.
So we've received commitments from our current residents that they are coming back and want rooms. We have that, right?
Yes.
They signed that.
Yes.
What does it look like for new students coming in during the spring semester with housing needs?
So we'll first accommodate the students. There were a group of students that we said, hey, go online for the fall. And we'll save your place in line in the spring.
And that number is how many?
We're right. Huh?
I've heard from 180 to less than.
Well, that's about how many took advantage of. That's not how many need housing.
Okay.
So the number that need housing is closer to about 50. So we,
use some straight percentages. We're saying that when you look at, unfortunately, about 10% is not going to come back. We're looking at taking away 10%. That's going to give us 4380. I mean, sorry, 4360 beds. That's what we need. So I still have about 65 beds left for students. And right now, we're saying that we'll have available, by our calculation, 4,425 beds. So we're gonna need 4360, using 90% as an indicator. So that's what give us a few beds left over for the new students that may come.
Yeah, this is one of those things where percentages are nice, but numbers are good.
Yeah, that's right. So we're looking at the numbers, 4360. That'll give us a 65 bed overage, in additional flexibility for that in-house.
so again, we're looking at reduction in the number of hotels, and obviously that cost goes down, and all of the wraparound services for each one of those we expect to go down as well. So
And did you ever look at the housing, talk to those contractors for the house we have on campus? You and Dr. Anderson, I know we've been really snowed under, but we gotta get that done before things.
so we own a couple of more properties on campus that we want to convert to student housing that we think could be an easy convert and bring online in the spring. That wouldn't require us to go for the SBC. We own the buildings, right?
Is this Clement and the kind of stuff?
No,
Clement's pretty bad.
yeah,
Clement has to be reclassified back to.
Yeah, because it was.
And they're not really feeling that one. So we just said we're gonna push them for the spring. We can talk to them a little bit more, but we're talking about the property down the street, another house on the backside of campus. So we have 3, I think it's 3 properties. Well,
Three homes. Three homes.
one is pretty big. I mean, they will house about 20 students. And then, yeah, that could, we can fix it up. And then we have the Kappa fraternity house. Backside. Should I have a house?
And do we own that or just Kappa?
Kappa owns it, it was recent. Do you see to the house? I
Okay,
didn't know about the Kappas.
They just leave them.
No, they have a meeting piece. Up here, you see it, and there's another side of the left side, residential. Lower basement. Access.
Let me ask the question. So of the projections for spring of 23, do you have any indication now, because I know recruitment is going on, fall of 23?
We think it's about the same as this year, because right now we're looking about 1,500 applications over last year. That's not who's been admitted. That's applications. So once we drill down further this month, we always get those numbers around mid-November, because we get them all the time. But we start drilling down to after this next month. Let's see where we are. And Mr. Issa probably will include some numbers to update you at the board next week. Make a note to make sure.
Continue.
So we feel good about the spring, and obviously, we anticipate that there will be those numbers will probably be larger. So we were estimating on the conservative side at 10 or 11%. Again, historically, it's been about 15%. One year, I think it was 14. But so we were conservative. We think that I think we should be able to meet the needs of the students for spring housing with that attrition. And so I'll go into just talking a little bit about the fall housing. I'll begin by saying that, you know, all of the things we do in terms of providing housing for students has to go before the state building commission. And so we have to, you know, see what their appetite is for some of the things we're trying to do. That's what I call stopgap. All of this is going to be just stopgap until we get some new buildings, until we get some more beds. All of this is just kind of to plug the holes until we can get a couple more buildings up, and that's going to just happen over the next 3 years. Our housing need, I don't anticipate our housing demand. It's not going to go down, right? Anything, it'll probably continue to rise. So we got to continue to put some measures in place, as Dr. Glover mentioned earlier, Dr. Johnson mentioned earlier. You know, it's things like the negotiation with Court Villa, which would give us a couple hundred plus more student beds. It's adjacent to the property we already own. It would be a good segue. We can do security and transportation and all that wrapped in together. That conversation has been going on for years. I think it's now to a point where everybody's really ready, right? You know, but again, that's one of those things, and I know Trustee Johnson has been helping us to navigate through that. But that's one of those things where we will have to go before a state building commission. Me personally, I think the state building commission will get it if it's financially makes sense, and Court Villa would financially make sense, like what we would be paying in terms of the students that would stay there. We're not going to be losing a lot of money for that, right? So obviously, hotels is the most expensive way to house students, and it's something that none of us really want to do. But you have to do it to allow students to not have their education interrupted with the trend here in the city. It is, you know, it's the most expensive way to house students. There are other ways to house students off campus. It just takes a little time to get those pieces in place. Hotels allow you to do it.
The places vetted.
Yeah, we have to get those places vetted and go through that. And that's what we're doing. We're digging into that. We expect to have some of those come online and to run quite a few of those up before SBC in the spring semester for the fall semester. Again, you know, I would have personally liked to have brought Clement back online. I believe we could have put a couple $1 million into that building, and it could have given us another stopgap for a few years just to, you know, it's obvious for me. It's obviously always better to have as many students on campus as we can. But I mean, I was okay when we realized that it wasn't an option, that we didn't spend a lot of time there. We just moved on to explore.
Having worked in there for several years, that is not a good option. No, really, it isn't. And it was on the tear down list. It was supposed to, it should be. And so that to revert that back into a dorm, that's not a lost leader. That's just a loss.
You might want to address a distinction, though. You mentioned about these apartment complexes between us simply being a facilitator that brings together students with private landlords versus us leasing it ourselves. So bringing together students where they will be the lessee, not the TSU, versus the ones where we will be the lessee.
No, we have, like, for example, on the backside of campus, you can use that term, but that near the, on that side, they're constructing an apartment complex now. That apartment complex, the owners came to us and talked with us. Okay, they came to us to discuss what our needs are.
Yeah.
And so in turn, we shared with them what our needs were not knowing that this is going to increase at this particular point in time. And we'd like to think that they're going to live up to their word in making some units affordable, right, for students. Select percentage of units affordable for students. And they're within walking distance of the campus. So, but we are having conversations with developers as they develop. We also have a couple of developers who have constructed or are in the process of constructing units that we're in conversation with to talk about what's available and how can you help us, or if you can help us.
And trustees, I have to tell you this, everybody's not anxious to work with us. The apartments at the corner, Charlotte, you turn on the road, the connector road, there are big several apartments there. We talked to them, I guess it was about 3 years ago now, about just leasing some apartments to us. I finally just got back to us, just stop playing games. I do not rent to TSU students. I will not rent to TSU students. So we knew a lot went into that conversation, and those words meant quite a bit. But we didn't have the time to stop and address it. We were just trying to find student housing. And so, and that may be the thinking of others. I'm not going to rent to TSU students, or students in general. We don't know. These specifics say TSU students.
Well, for their funding, they can get better discount rates or whatever it is, because they have Section 8 sections or lower income portions of the things. If they do lease to the university, as opposed to leasing to students, that's certainly safer for them, but that may still qualify them for that low income housing bond piece.
Right, if they guaranteed a certain percentage of it.
Yeah, but they've got to be guaranteed, and that's the
Well,
issue. So,
remember, we found another hotel for students, and we were of the mindset to go back to the State Building Commission to ask for another hotel. But we did ask, could we just assist the students to provide some type of financial aid or workshop or something so the students could pay them? They wanted to get us directly. So we tried to we came as close as we possibly could without paying ourselves directly to the hotel. We were working through the students. They're gonna pay you. That wasn't enough. So that deal fell through. They wouldn't do it.
yeah, but is that a direction we're thinking about going? That
But we've had those conversations about us serving as the
at least, yeah,
right.
so, yeah.
And so in turn, we haven't backed away from those conversations, but we're approaching very cautiously.
And do you think the building commission will allow us to do that?
That's what.
And I'm not a landlord, but I certainly would feel much more comfortable leasing to a state agency who then subleases than to individual students. You know?
And we've done
That may,
I've done that before, because therefore, if the person needs to leave or withdraw from school, then it allows the institution to put someone else in that bed,
we can do it, yeah.
you know, versus that person is obligated to walk out.
Of course, the other side of that is when somebody that is in our apartment that we leased from that company, they decide to have a party, and now the lease for everybody is gone, right? So that's,
Yeah, you end up putting support services in there for.
there's risks on both sides.
So that's what we did with the hotels. Remember, they have RAs, we got security.
Right.
There are ways that you can address that, although I think not a challenge, but with the apartments is a little bit different. Hotels, most time you gotta go into one lobby.
Right.
And you've got some element of security related to
Semi-control,
them versus apartments where you've got separate apartments and people can just go to someone's unit. They don't have to go through the lobby.
And a little bit of, we tested the water with that idea this semester, with Leadership House 1 and 2. That's the model that we have. We have 10 students in each one of those houses.
What is Leadership House?
So it's a property that's adjacent to the campus, right across from Epps Hall. It's owned by TSU alums. So we've gotten a lot of alums who stepped forward and said, "Hey, how can I help?"
Yeah.
Right.
Some of the different sororities, fraternities, they've been calling. We just can't say, okay, yes, we have to go and vet it and see when it fit within the model. We're giving it for the students where they still have the best experience by staying there. So it will be at the students' own expense, but we have to still make sure that if we're going to recommend it, it has to be something that's recommendable.
So, again, testing the waters with that this semester has gone over very, very well. But you're right, you do have to have staff in those spaces.
So we spent a good bit of time talking about the supply side. But at some point, we're gonna have to look at the demand side.
Yep.
Until our supply can catch up. And so,
The challenge that we're having right now with the state, is they want us to demolish the old house. And we don't disagree with that. But our position has been that we can't demolish and build new housing because the demand is there.
Yeah, the perception is they want to balance in and out, balance out, and that's not where we are. Okay, and so part of our case really has to be not just incoming. I mean, even if you zero out any incoming students needing housing, the percentage of our current students who are going to need housing because of the cost increase in the area, it's going to increase. We may end up at a point where 90% of our students live on campus or live in our housing. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good draw. That's a very good draw. Okay. But it's an expensive draw. And that's not the model that our sister institutions are living off of.
Not the other 5 institutions.
Yeah.
Memphis may come closer than
Yeah.
the others.
Knoxville, you know, they've had a lot of success, and so their housing challenges are huge because everybody wants to be down there and they have so many students. And they actually did a hotel as well.
Sure.
This year. And their
And so
line,
did ETSU did a hotel. So,
and Memphis did as well.
Yeah.
Well, Memphis did an outside, right, like apartment kind of deal there.
Yeah.
So
yeah, so the public thinks we're the only people who need hotels. The truth is that a lot of people need hotels, and that's
Well,
part of our.
What happened with us is that different population, we say you're on the wait list.
Yeah.
In their minds, it means if I go to Nashville, I can still get a
Wait list means you're in.
I'm waiting in the lobby till you give me.
well, to trustee Pinnock point on the demand side, what we needed to do was to shift the students' mindset, because their mindset has always been, you're gonna figure out a place for me to live, right? TSU is gonna figure out a place, and if you don't figure out a place for me to live, then shame on you, and I'm gonna be a homeless, and I'm gonna go and do this, and all those things, that's your fault. An institution like UT, they get in line very early, and they know once it's gone, and you start making other arrangements, right? And so we have to start messaging that kind of out now. We couldn't do it then. We couldn't shift the playbook in the middle of the game. And so, we take the black eye, meaning administration, for wanting to really provide and do whatever we could to make sure there wasn't an interruption in the students' learning experience. But you're right, we do have a certain number of beds, and we're gonna go after some more, but we're gonna start messaging that very early out. We moved up our housing application timeframe, which gives us a better sight of the need, and we can close it off. The other component of that, we won't just say, hey, at this point, we're out, good luck. We're building a framework where once we're out of our housing, we can still direct you to other entities that are willing to take on college students and live in those spaces. And so that's the inventory we're trying to build right now. Some of that is with alumni who own homes and say, yeah, I wouldn't mind renting out. You've got other places that are affordable. We're saying, hey, give us 4 units over here. You got some places in the city that are income-based markets. So getting our numbers in that space, we got an apartment complex right here behind the golf course that's income-based, right? And so they'll give us, we can get 10 units there, right, to put our students in. So we'll start directing those students to those spaces. So that
It'll be their expense, not ours.
Sure. Yeah.
So we have been working through this most of the semester, working through the second semester. And we deal with the challenge of the first semester. But now we know that we have to work through getting students situated for second semester. But some will come for the first time in January, not 35, 67. We'll have probably 50 or 60 students that we need beds for. So we want to make sure that we can at least direct students, and that messaging has to, and if there's something that we may have done wrong or we did wrong, well, one, we own everything that went wrong and we did. We have to own that. That belongs to us, and we have to own that. But then secondly, we have to make sure that their student experience is not interrupted So we're doing all that we can to make it seamless. Here's what we have for you. We're out of housing on our contiguous campus, but here's some places you can go, you can check out. We've already vetted them. I got a call from one of the Nick sisters that she had a place that she would rent. And I mean, I've been getting calls. I've been sending to you, but some of them coming in recently. Somebody at Cooper's Funeral Saturday, so they had a place they was going to check out. So they're saying they're still coming in. We just can't say, okay, here's students who want it. We just check out, make sure it meets our model, meets the specifications of what we set up.
So we're gonna have to do magic to cover the short term. The long term, 2 years out, right?
Probably 2.5.
Okay, and so what did we or what are we asking building commission for new dorms and new construction?
Well, before we get there, let's finish up discussing this particular agenda item first, because it is on. Anything else?
No, that's it. That's our plans for the 2023 and fall. That's kind of where we're going.
So closing this part out, let me just encourage staff to continue to look at the demand side. How we might manage it, your point, how we might communicate it, message it, because we bring on a new communications team, things like that. So.
And what hurt us even as much as housing challenges is the fact that the students didn't comprehend what we were trying to do.
Sure.
They didn't get the communications and we didn't do it properly. We have to own that part of it too. So we looked over and kind of debriefed and said what went wrong and how could we have made it better. That's something we have to own too, that there were students were saying, and parents, they didn't get phone calls returned. That's the frustrating part. When you call over and over again and nobody calls you back or picks up, that was just something that we shouldn't ever have to happen to a student. Therefore, at the last meeting, we were directed to set up a customer relations department. This is what we're doing. It's in my desk now, Dr. J. You sent it to me. I want to add up a few things to it. Some thoughts I had to on it. And that would alleviate a lot. One, we're trying to get that person, that team, it's gonna take more than one person, it'll take a team. Sure. And so, it was in a pushback, please. It's a board direction. So we get into customer service. Somebody has to answer, you know how frustrating it is. I was trying to just book a flight the other day. And Dustin said the wait time is hour and 20 minutes. That's a my God, that's almost 2 hours. Hour and 18 minutes, my goodness. So I'm sitting there waiting, it took out longer than that. So, there's nothing more frustrating than wanting to get a return phone call, some return response, and you can't get it. And so we deserve to get back to parents who gotten to us and they've been trusting their students to us, and they want answers. And so we can't always got people get upset because I can't talk to them personally. I can't take every person from the call personally. I can't shift it to I do any good president would do. I sit with Dr. Johnson. So I know how to get the calls returned to them. But that's what that's what we're working on now. That hurt just as much because when they didn't get return phone calls, they started calling whoever they thought could get back to them. They called the Secretary of State, they called THEC, they called TBR, they called the governor's office. And so it was something that if you don't return phone calls, people just say, somebody's gonna help me, So we gotta make sure that never, ever, ever happens again. So that's what we have to work through that part. And as difficult as it is, I have to say, it's our fault. We have to own it.
But there's also a solution. There's a queuing, there are a number of queuing systems out there that work. So I know the staff that's already looking at things like that. And I want to make one more point. That when I say manage demand, if we're not growing, then we're dying. So I'm not saying let's stop growing. I'm only saying let's manage it in a way. Let's manage it in a way that supply and demand sort of equal.
Well, I've gotten that question. why do you stop admitting students? So we have to separate admissions, it's separate housing from students having the right to an education. So if students want to be educated, that's when the communication comes in. Just let them know we don't have any housing. We gladly accept your TSU. You have 3.0, we glad for you to come to TSU. We don't have no more housing. And the wait list is closed. So
Well, and that's the message that has to be out there. You know, college is a privilege to begin with.
yes.
And you're special to get admitted, right? But you have housing for this number. We'd love to have you. We think you're special, but we can't provide you with this. I would like to see in the mission, vision of housing, I'd like us to look and actually consider including ultimately housing 80% of all of our students here. I think that's aspirational, but I think that this housing issue is never going to go away. It's never going away. The cost of housing is going to rise, rise, rise. And unless we can control the entire life cycle of our students, we have to take that advantage. And, you know, it's not going to get cheaper to wait 6 months.
You have some markets that are untapped that we need to tap into, such as the graduate student, the married student, the veteran student.
Well, when we start looking at faculty
That's part of
members,
housing.
I mean, it's all part of that same thing. So, you know, we've got to be able to support everyone in the academic community.
Right, and one size don't fit all.
Oh, for sure.
You know,
For
that's,
sure.
that's the other
No,
challenge.
yeah.
But I think we also have to always go back to what Dr. Glover mentioned and Dean Stevenson was alluding to, and that is, we look at our student profile. So when we do say, look, we want to admit you, we're going to enroll you, here's our housing, this is all the housing we have. It is incumbent upon us to totally realize, though, that with our students, we've got to do more than, you know, say, hey, you know, good luck on the housing front.
Right.
It's got to be facilitating simplification, access, information
Yeah.
that these folks have, and you're slotting them into various different places, even though you may not be owning or be responsible.
Yeah.
They need that information. They're
Yeah.
coming from Chicago, they're coming from Detroit, they're coming from Memphis. They need that, and they need us to help them with that information.
And we're different than other institutions who have this problem and simply say 2.5 GPA. No, we're going to raise it to 3.2, and then our housing demand will go down because our student demand. Well, that's not what we are. That's not what we want to do. We want to be able to create and offer a controlled academic experience and environment that's supportive to get you from point A to point B. And we can't do that if we don't control the housing piece.
And we had, when we raised the admission standards 5 years ago.
Yeah.
When we had to move it from 2.2, I believe, then 2.25
Yeah.
or 19 on ACT.
Yeah.
I mean, that was reflective to me of quality students. So we had to push to get that changed. So 2.5, maybe time to look at it a second time. See, we should be 2.7. Because I looked at, if we had a 2.7, we still would have over 3,000 students. First year students. Because quality attracts quality.
Yeah. I agree.
So we were to look at it again, and we probably put on the agenda for it later down the road. But at that time, my point I was gonna make was that 1,000 students didn't come.
Yeah.
Because they didn't meet the requirements. And so people said, why are we enrollment decline? Well, we changed the standard. It would pick back up. They'll put how COVID hit, but now it's picking back up. And students are having a good time talking about it. And the prejudice, we brag too. I'm talking to FAMU, he said, we got the best, our students talk about, they got the best experience. He said, your students start sending messages back saying ours is better. We doing this and that. The concert, we were talking about the concert they had. They said it was 5,000 students. I know it wasn't 5,000 there. They said it was 5,000 students. I don't know when it was, August, maybe September, early September, May, June. In fact, they used some huge number. Was 8,000? I thought about 3 or 4,000. But anyway, so they're having a good time. Now they have some challenges. They're talking about some success. So, we saw something that put on the paper the other day. But we kind of get those out of the way. But we know that there's nothing as long as I'm sitting in this chair, it's not gonna interrupt the student experience and have a student treated unfairly.
But we have to take control of the entire academic experience. And that includes the academic in classroom, the outside support structure, and the housing piece. That, and if we can do that, we're gold.
Because if you were to come up to me and say something out of the way and scream and holler, you and I may be able to forgive you and get past it. But for a student, you know what kind of effect you have long-term on a student up in your face like that. So you have to really look at the academic side of it, talking about housing and enrollment, but the academic piece, we can't leave that part out too, even when it comes to housing.
I was trying to stay in the lane, but I mean, you know, the demand creates, you know, a need for other resources.
Don't we hear from trustee, yeah, I think you want to say,
I would say that I was keeping my mouth shut for a minute.
really?
Yeah, I would, but I think that one thing that I want to talk about is that, I said it last time in the board meeting, but students are not seeing this. Right, like what the communication piece has not been there. So whenever no one was talking to us, we're creating our own rules. Y'all did this, this is what's going on. TSU wants to do this. And so that's not really happening you all's case as you're here meeting right now. So if we can find a way to, in our plan coming up to incorporate how we're going to communicate this to the students, I think that would help. Honestly. I really do, because that's what I think hurt us in the long run too, because my class, my generation, we're gonna find a way to get our answers, and we couldn't talk to you all, so they went abroad to Fox and to the state, and that didn't help. And they don't see that didn't help. They just want their individual answers. So that's what I would say.
And to that point, you know, this is the part that was a bit frustrating that we couldn't push back on. Yeah, a young lady go on the news, say I'm homeless, they didn't give me. I mean, and she literally just put her application the day before. All right, and
The
so,
day before.
and we couldn't go on and say, now, come on.
Well, you can't discuss student. You can't.
But it's a great headline for Fox, right? You know, I'm sleeping in my car, right? That's a great headline, right?
And they may have filled her application out for her.
And Dave Stevens mentioned something that I just realized, because as a student, I thought that TSU owed me now. Yeah, I did. I'm be honest. I really, I don't know if it, because it was a HBCU or because of what, but I was like, I should get housing. And then, but students will apply late. They'll be on the wait list, and then it's like for us, it's like we can house them regardless. So I think if we can find a way to address that without saying that that housing is what'd you say, that it's a part, it's separate from you getting. Yeah, because we don't. Yeah, we definitely do not see that. That you all.
It's a culture.
It is
Change. It is because we did it with the IDs.
Yeah.
So requiring students wear IDs.
Mm-hmm.
They hadn't been wearing IDs, and all of the comments were nobody wears IDs. But when you look at it, everybody wears an ID. Even at Wendy's and fast food restaurants, everybody wears an ID.
The fence
Yeah.
around the campus.
So yeah, that thinking and that paradigm shift, it takes time, right? We gotta start saying that to students and letting them know that attending Tennessee State University does not guarantee housing. It means that we got a certain amount. You do what you're supposed to do, and you're gonna have a great shot at getting help. Again, they get that at UT. I mean, they stand in line and they know, you know, it's got rolling the dice.
I was a professor at Howard. The first year students pretty much get housing. Some sectors, so they tell you up front, your last 2 years, you don't have any housing. You don't even try to get your house. They tell you, go out and start now, trying to get you some housing for next year, because you will not have housing in junior senior year. And they accept that, you know.
Well, let me
Second
throw
round.
out another model. So when I first started teaching at universities, I worked at a very, very small, very expensive private college. And once you were admitted, you got, this is 1980s. It was a $10,000 fee. And that was your tuition and housing. You could come and not live in housing, but it was still $10,000. And so we knew that everyone we admitted, we had housing. And once housing was full, they had enough money, right? They could shut off the
That was here?
no, that was in Idaho.
Oh, okay.
But it would shut off the capacity, right? Shut off the faucet. So they knew that. It may be, this is a different spin, that certain criteria, whatever that would be, quality of student. This is the package, tuition and housing, right? Or you could just put tuition, and that would be very, very clear that this has housing, this doesn't have housing. It may just be packaging it differently.
That's interesting. I'm not sure how that was working this.
I'm not sure what either, but in the messaging piece, you would see that, right? This is 10,000, whatever that is, and this is 3,000, right? And so you come here and gamble for housing, but you knew it up front.
Any other questions from the committee before we move on to the next agenda item? If not, we'll not hear a proposed the report on the proposed TSU long-term housing plan.
You want to ask your question again? I think that would be the same one.
Sure.
It was along the lines of this long-term housing.
Oh. What did what are we requesting for new construction from State Building Commission and the timeframe? I know when I spoke with the comptrollers, and I had read earlier, we wanted one more dorm, and I said, no. Two. I want two. I want more. We want as much housing as we can get. So where are we in this? What did we ask for? Where are we going? And what's the time frame? Because I'm trying to fill the short-term gap, but I don't want the short term to turn into long term. In 3 years, have we solved this problem?
Doug, you probably-
But Trustee Johnson, you had mentioned talking to the council's office about one dorm. It's actually, when we went to them requesting a new dorm, it was for 1,000 beds.
Yeah.
But based on space, it was going to make more sense to have 2 500-bed residence. So we've been in conversations with the folks with SBC, some of the folks that sit on that committee. And I think we've got some really good traction to make this happen for them to start building in the spring. We've been working really close with TBR. That's been a great help. Dick Tracy and his team, we actually already have on RFP, the design and the construction manager is already in the works. That speeds the process up by about 6 months. And so they would actually be able to get started in the spring if all goes well here at the end of this year. The state is now entertaining the P3, which does speed up the process from beginning to ending of the completion of the project. I've been through one of those personally. 15 to 18 months, we can see it happen. So looking at fall of 24 will probably be the earliest right now that we could get a new residence hall online. But our unique situation would be spring or fall, right? It doesn't matter because we have that housing challenge here right now.
Yeah, and my comment to the comptroller's office was 2 of what we just built. That's what I think.
We're looking at 2 500-bed facilities. And so we're getting ready to evaluate the designers, I think next week proposed.
So I'm not a designer, but just a guy. And so it seems to me, and I haven't been through it yet, that the dorms that we just built seem to work. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can we speed up the process by simply replicating?
We discussed that.
Not necessarily replicating those particular, in that building, you have, what we've done is, if you look at that building, floors 3 and up are all the same.
Yeah.
So in terms, we designed the water lines and everything, we stacked them, so you don't have it running all throughout the building and complicating the infrastructure. So we did simplify the infrastructure for that building. And what we've said we want to do with the new facilities is be as simple, nice, attractive, functional, but as simple as possible so we don't have a lot of design specs going into it.
But the design specs for the building we just built are already done.
If we're using the same contract.
But the contractor's supposed to live up to those specs, so hopefully that's the way it's supposed to work. So if we took this package, this design package that is working and just planted it on another location and did that, could we accelerate this process?
We would look at all possible means to accelerate the construction of the facility. Replicating what we have versus what materials we use and what's in the supply chain available.
That would create a consistency all the way across. And also for maintenance, all the issues would be the same and we wouldn't have to deal with all that stuff. So
And a lot of the time frame is not really the actual building. Once they start building that
Yeah.
building, it went up. It's the red tape of the state.
well, it's the approval process. We did this with the science building, you know, so it's 3 years to plan and
Yeah.
18 months to build. And so if we can cut the 3 years to plan out and say, here's the specs, here's the blueprints, get on it, dig the hole. I mean, that,
And that's part of it is one of, like I said, identifying where they can possibly be located that won't interrupt the existing buildings. Putting them, lay down space and all that out of the way to expedite them being able to access the points and things of that nature. So all of that's being factored into the equation. We have these conversations.
And I think you need to keep in mind too, the residence hall that just went online this fall will have eateries in them. So these new residence halls would not have, they would have a small pod. It would include a place where they could buy sandwiches or Coke or something like
So-
that, but not full-fledged restaurants like we have.
why not?
Well, two reasons. One, that really slows down the process. You're now looking at anywhere from 18 months to 24 to 36 months, or when you have to include dining services within those. Our issue right now is not so much from the auxiliary side from food, it's that we need beds. And you got to think in mind, the cost have went up for construction. So we have a capacity in which we have to operate in, not to max out our students from affordability. So we only have so much in a debt service capacity that we can take on.
But
And we're looking at.
everyone who sleeps there is gonna eat.
Yeah, we're looking at.
Oh, absolutely. No, that's not what I'm saying.
Purpose space, in turn, that space can be flexed as to what is needed at the time. And then, of course, depending on where they're located. If they're located near, if the resident, one of them is located near the new residence hall we just constructed, then they can utilize the resources that's already in that building. Location, and in the university master plan, there are new eateries and things of that nature designed. So combining the master plan with the housing master plan, and coming up with a total comprehensive plan.
Well, so I don't want to cut off any discussion of the day, right? This is all good. I think it's all healthy. But I do want us to move towards where we're trying to get to today, and that's to at least hear from the administration on some of the additional items. So if there are no further discussions, then the next item on the agenda is the report on the long-term housing plan. This is an information discussion item, so no vote is required. I'm asking Dr. Glover or the designee to provide a report on this agenda item.
So that's actually what we kind of just jumped
Yeah,
into.
yeah, I mean, you did, so just for.
Thank you for interrupting.
Right, so are there any further comments on that?
There is conversation about Court Villa, still trying to acquire Court Villa for the immediate need and the long term. We know the life expectancy of Court Villa is not very long, but the long term would be to construct new housing.
So is this a purchase or a lease we're talking about?
We would like to purchase the property.
And what's the number of beds in that?
Let me just go at this. Trustee Johnson is on the line. We've talked about a purchase, we talked about a lease with an option to buy. And so maybe she might know. Trustee Johnson, maybe you can tell us a little more about it.
Trustee Johnson, Andre Johnson.
Yes, yes. You hear me?
Yes.
So, yeah, I talked to, both, Director of Finance and, Dr. Johnson related to this. And I think the next step on the agenda was to get an appraisal done so that we could then present, the best options for the building commission and the state. I think that, those were the next steps, if I'm not correct, incorrect, right, Dr. Johnson?
Yes,
So. We gotta get somebody,
yeah, we gotta get somebody on state contract.
so they have some, don't they
The
have
person
some?
we used before was not on, so in turn, we're trying to get him on the state approval list to assess the property for.
Did anybody else know this?
It's-
Or they were swamped?
Oh, just can't get in the razor.
They were just swamped because of the housing demand in this.
But yes,
Were you able to hear me?
Yes, yes.
so what is the number of beds that that facility has right now?
We are
And are they one bedroom apartments, two bedroom apartments?
Hello?
Trustee Johnson.
Can you hear us?
Has a mixture. Two bedrooms. But what we looked at was modifying the apartments to accommodate at least one additional person.
So 3 in each.
Yeah, what we talked about was modifying the apartment units to accommodate more students than what's existing there, because we don't need the whole apartment for student lifestyle. That's what.
And one thing I do want to add on Court Bill, and Dr. Johnson, you mentioned about purchase versus leasing. For us, it's more advantageous to lease the property. Sure. Okay, that, from a cash flow perspective, for one, I'm a pretty conservative type CFO, so we make our money work for us. Okay, so that's one of the things that makes more sense, for us. We manage the inflow of that, those receipts versus the outflow of those payments.
Well, the fee we charge students could cover the cost of our lease if we manage this right.
Yeah, that is correct. Well, that's how we build it. For example, with the new residence hall that just went online, the revenues that are received for that housing backs that particular bond. Same thing with any other property that we would do.
I just don't want us to keep doing the loss leader and other stuff. So,
What are you talking about? So,
well, when we put a kid in a hotel, what they're paying is not covering our total costs for them to live in.
right, but I don't. Yeah, and agreed.
Yeah.
But again, those are one of those things we had to do, but.
Those are panics. I get it. I get it. I get it. But this
But
is-
we're in a good
yeah.
financial position.
Yeah.
In order to do something like.
Yeah,
that.
but would be in a better one if we didn't do it. But I just, if we do a lease purchase, we just want to make sure the inflow covers the outflow.
And that's part of the reason why we want to add an additional bed in it, to make sure that we're covering it.
Well, that's one of the first things we look at.
Yeah, we already read those type of.
Yeah.
numbers.
Yeah, but
We don't
yeah,
have a-
yeah,
It's kinda not-
and I think
that's your time model.
from a political perspective, a lease won't remove the construction project from the State Building Commission. It's not viewed, it's kind of not going to be viewed as a permanent placement because they're going to count beds. That's all they're going to count. So we might be better off just leasing until they make their decision.
We're gonna run the number. We're gonna do
Yeah.
the lease versus my model.
Okay.
Anything else you want to add to that?
Is there a time, I'm sorry, is there a time frame on this? Please, when could this be online?
Well, we gotta back it up. We work on the building, state building commission's calendar, schedule for November. It was pushed to December. Pushed to December, so we can get it approved in December. Then we can start counting from there. I'm not to, I don't, that's not my skill set to know exactly where, but I know somebody around this table knows how long it will take from the time it gets approved to the time it takes to go.
We would look at the spring and summer as the renovation period. And so in turn, trying to open it for fall 23. Be the target date.
Oh, 23? 24.
Court Villa.
Oh, Court
You're
Villa.
talking about hotel, you're talking about.
You're talking about-
Right now, it's all.
He's talking about Court Villa.
I'm talking about Corvilla.
Okay.
And once again, ballpark number of beds.
220, 230.
Any additional comments or questions on agenda item number 6? Is there any additional business?
I would like us to, as we build this long-term plan, is to build in housing capability for postdocs, for doctoral graduate students. And even one of the cool things that, when I first got hired in Texas, and they, gave me a $26,000 a year paycheck in the olden days. And they said, we know you can't buy a house, but you can live in our housing for 1 year. And while you build up a cap.
Well,
That capability also is something we might want to consider.
that's a favor I'm making to the education committee, so let them know that future housing needs, in addition to include housing for students, the housing graduate students, families, and staff.
Yep.
To move over our housing needs by campus community.
Perfect. Yes. Thank you.
So this question is for committee members. Going forward, I'd like to set a meeting cadence for us that would occur at some point before between our board meetings. So we'd have a meeting between the November and the March meeting and the March meeting. So Secretary Pendleton will send out some suggested dates for you to comment on. So we'd like to do that. The other thing, in terms of the committee charge, going back to what Chair Cole had outlined for us, I'd like to ask Trustee McKenzie if he would focus some of his energy on around the supply side and work with Dr. Johnson, Curtis Johnson, and Mr. Allen on what those supply side issues might be and how we might address that. And I know that Trustee Andre Johnson has been working on Port Villa, but we also need some focus on the demand side. So Trustee Johnson, if you would give some attention to the demand side and work with Dean Stevenson and probably Mr. Izzard on the demand side and help us understand and what those issues might be. So those are the two things that I'd like to close out with us today. Is there, if there are no other questions or concerns and all hearts and minds are clear, I move that the committee adjourn the meeting. Any discussion?
Is there a second?
Nobody seconded.
Is there a second? Okay.
Second the motion.
All right. The questions on the motion to adjourn. Secretary Felton?
Trustee Pinnock,
Yes.
trustee Andre Johnson,
Yes.
trustee Alderman McKenzie.
Yes.
Motion is approved. We are all adjourned. Thank you.
Go and stop.
The line.
Right.
So